When your hobby's making video movies, what do you do when a 99-year-old aunt hands down an album of family photographs spanning the years 1917 to 1940? One approach would just be to transfer them one by one from album to video, and with perhaps a commentary. But photos to me are history, and they're bound up with history. Do you remember where you were when Kennedy was shot? When the Twin Towers collapsed? Most of us live fairly ordinary lives, but extraordinary things happen around us. So, what I'm going to do is, as best I can, tie the pictures in to historical events that happened during those years. And they were momentous years, as anybody who lived through the early part of the 20th century will testify. Before we begin this epic journey, brought to us by the miracle of Kodak panchromatic film, let's have a look at the family. We'll start off just a typical family group sometime in the 1930s. In detail, here's my granddad, my grandfather, who fought in World War I in Palestine. If you go to another item on my website, you'll find his journey. Here's mother, grandmother. Grandmother was, a grandmother, looked after the family. She was a movie fan, I'm happy to say. My father and mother split up at the beginning of the war, so he doesn't play a big part in this. And there's my mother. Mum was the eldest of the three daughters. She was born in 1907. And then in 1913 came Kath, the second. And then the third, Molly, who was born in 1916. Molly and I are the only two survivors. And here's Molly today in her 99th, almost her 99th year. Her birthday's in December. Oh yeah, well, this is your author, director, call him whatever you like, it's me. On August 15th, 1917, when my grandfather was still in Palestine and Auntie Molly was 8 months old, the Canadians under Arthur Currie started an offensive on what came to be known as Hill 70. General Haig, the brilliant English strategist, ordered Currie to make a head-on attack on the city of Lewes. Currie, who decided he really didn't want to have a whole lot of Canadians slaughtered, decided instead to go around the corner and attack Hill 17, which they captured in 10 days of fighting. In 1919, while Kath and Molly were cavorting in the wild woods, at least that's what it looks like, the baseball world was shattered, and the Chicago White Sox and Cincinnati Reds World Series was destroyed. Take me out to the ball game. Take me out to the crowd. Was Shoeless Joe Jackson really guilty? Apparently, the jury's still out. In June, the Treaty of Versailles was signed, saddling Germany with a massive amount of reparations which they could never, ever hope to pay, and thus paving the way for World War II. That same year, Mussolini formed the Italian Fascist Party, and Adolf Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, which quickly became the National Socialist Nazi Party. In 1925, her grandfather was chauffeur at Walden Manor, a large estate near London. Here he is with an Armstrong Siddeley coupe. Maybe he took grandmother and Kath and Molly to the seaside. I don't know where my mother was, but since she was about 18 in 1925, and this was the age of the flapper, who knows what she was up to. In 1925, the first motel was opened in San Luis Obispo, California. And in England, John Logie Baird created the first television set. Remember, he's the guy you have to thank next time you have to watch crap like this. On a more serious note, Adolf Hitler published Mein Kampf, and after a short spell in prison, he turned the Nazi Party from a revolutionary movement into a real political party aimed at seizing power. And to cap off a marvellous year, Margaret Thatcher was born. Muffled cheers or muffled groans in the background, depending on your persuasion. It's 1930, and here we can see grandmother and Kath, right-hand side in the top row, and Molly in the center at the bottom, with a group of the extensive downstairs servants employed at the manor. Here's my grandfather cozying up with one of the parlour maids. He doesn't quite fit the image of the Downton Abbey chauffeur, but then Grandpop was a happily married man with a whole bunch of daughters. She looks cute though, doesn't she? I don't know what the occasion was, but I'm just guessing that this is more of the staff dressed up for a fancy dress party. Emphasis on the word party, except that if you look at the faces, it seems to me that it's more a case of we're supposed to be having a good time, but we're really not. It's probably freezing cold and just about to rain. Time, I think, to show you where Walden Manor is, or rather was. It was destroyed by the German Luftwaffe in 1944. It lies about 15 miles south of London, but here it is in 1929, taken from the air, obviously, and it's huge. But the part that we're interested in, where almost all of the family photos were taken, is the so-called West Lodge. Here's the West Lodge, and it was given to the chauffeur of the family to live. So this is where everybody stayed. A nice little place. It's still now a private house surrounded by other private houses. And here it is today, courtesy of Google Street View. In January, the Lone Ranger was first heard on radio from station WXYZ in Detroit. And later that year, England, France, Italy, Japan, and the United States put their signatures to the London Naval Treaty. They talked an awful lot about battleships and submarines, which had been used extensively in World War I, but nobody talked about the aircraft carrier. As the Great Depression got underway, R.B. Bennett became a Canadian Prime Minister. Hands up everyone who's heard of the Bennett buggy. What else happened? Well, the Hayes Office Movie Production Code was passed, which meant for the next 35 years, movies got a lot less interesting, and married couples had to sleep in single beds. Oh, and let's not forget, the Vatican improved the rhythm method of birth control. I always thought that meant if you kept dancing, nothing would happen.
If the nightingales could sing like you, they'd sing much sweeter than they do, for you brought a new love to me.
1932 was a big year. Well, for me personally anyway, because my parents got married, and here they are posed at the door of the chauffeur's lodge. Big year for Toronto too. The Maple Leafs won their first Stanley Cup. They beat the New York Rangers. In the United States, Franklin Delano Roosevelt kicked Herbert Hoover out and became the president. In Germany, the news was not so good. First of all, Adolf Hitler, who of course was Austrian, became a German citizen. The Nazi Party became the second largest in the Reichstag, and Hermann Göring became chairman of that same august body. 1933 was a slow year for family pictures. Well, I was born. And Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers made their first movie together, Flying Down to Rio. In 1936, Britain's King George V died, to be replaced, after an unfortunate interlude with an American divorcee, with George VI. In Germany, Adolf Hitler was, finally, supreme leader. Meanwhile, back in England, the family was enjoying a Sunday afternoon at home on the lawn at Walden Manor. Take a good look at this photo. It's a rarity. Your narrator, no doubt visiting for the day, actually tries his hand at gardening. Even the cat can't believe it. Molly and Kath, being young, had friends, and here they are with one of them. Maybe they went to the movies, perhaps to see Charles Chaplin in Modern Times, or the great Ziegfeld, which won the Oscar that year. My personal favorite would be My Man Godfrey. How can you beat Carole Lombard and William Powell?
Everything. Just sit right down there like a good girl, and in just a minute, you'll forget that you had any trouble.
For the old folks, it was just a picnic. 1936 was also the year of the Berlin Olympic Games, the last one until the end of World War II, where Hitler, I no doubt, got extremely peeved to see Jesse Owens, a black man, beat the pride of the Aryan nation in the 100 meters dash. In 1937 started off with a bang when the German airship Hindenburg burst into flames while landing at Lakehurst, New Jersey. Not long after that, another great disaster occurred when the great appeaser Neville Chamberlain became Prime Minister of Great Britain. Hitler's Luftwaffe had also made a bit of a bang. In April, they visited Spain and destroyed the small town of Guernica. He celebrated by having another one of his Nuremberg rallies. Very impressive. The BBC reported it
who holds the
in a
destiny
newsreel.
of the German people in his hands still ponders his course.
I love a parade. Well, Germany was the place to go that year. Hey, even Canada's Mackenzie King paid a visit. But is our family downhearted? Do they hear the ominous sounds of war in the background as we rush through 1937? Nah, not a bit of it. Here we are, family gathering. On the top there's Kath and Jack. They've just become engaged. My mother and Molly. And below, the old folks and the very young folk. No, I don't know what they were working on. And I don't know what Molly's reading. of Mice and Men was published that year. Oh, yes, and also a book by a soon-to-be prominent German general. Judging by his successes in the Western Desert 5 years later, I'm guessing that none of the English generals bothered to pick up his book. They might have learned something.
Yes, yes, my baby said yes, yes. I'm glad she said yes, yes.
Yes, it's me again. I still remember this toy, a cannon that fired real bullets at real men. Meanwhile, the old folks go off on a seaside vacation. Movies of 1937 included Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, to give it its full title, the Oscar-winning Life of Emile Zola, what I consider to be the Marx Brothers' funniest movie, A Day at the Races, and perhaps one of the greatest films ever made, La Grande Illusion. Set in World War I, it documents the end of the supposed nobility of war. 1938 started with a swing. Benny Goodman and the first Carnegie Hall jazz concert. While Molly and Grandma enjoyed a rather chilly afternoon in the garden, Hitler marched into Austria. As you can see, most of the people were very, very pleased to see him, so don't feel sorry for the Austrians. Undeterred by these events, the family enjoys summer in the garden. Molly continues knitting on whatever it is she's knitting, and finds time to horse around a little bit. And your narrator is getting a little bit older. And in September, we stepped just that little bit closer to World War II when Cheery Neville came back from Berlin, having just sold Czechoslovakia, well, half of it, to the Germans.
And he said that the settlement of the Czechoslovakian problem, which has now been achieved, is, in my view, only the prelude to a larger settlement in which all Europe may find peace. This morning,
and if you believe that, I got a bridge in Brooklyn that's going real cheap. In October, Orson Welles scared the pants off half of the United States with his radio broadcast of The War of the Worlds. Let's listen in, shall we?
We are bringing you an eyewitness account of what's happening on the Wilmuth Farm, Grover's Mill, New Jersey.
Ladies and gentlemen, am I on? Ladies and gentlemen, here I am, back of a stone wall that adjoins Mr. Wilmuth's garden. From here, I get a sweep of the whole scene. I'll give you every detail as long as I can talk and as long as I can see. More state police have arrived. They're drawing up a cordon in front of the pit. About 30 of them. No need to push the crowd back now. They're willing to keep their distance. The captain's conferring with someone. Can't quite see who. Oh, yes, I believe it's Professor Pearson. Yes, it is. Now they've parted, and the professor moves around one side, studying the object, while the captain and two policemen advance with something in their hands. I can see it now. It's a white handkerchief tied to a pole. Flag of truce. If those creatures know what that means, what anything means. Wait a minute, something's happening. Humped shape is rising out of the pit. I can make out a small beam of light against a mirror. What's that? There's a jet of flame springing from the mirror, and it leaps right at the advancing men. It strikes them head on. Lord, they're turning into flames. Now the whole field's caught up by the woods, the barns. The gas tanks of the automobiles spreading everywhere. It's coming this way now, about 20 yards to my right.
Oh! How's Floyd here?
How did he get in here? Let's finish off the year with a quick look at some of the best movies. You Can't Take It With You won the Oscar and features one of my favorite ladies, Jean Arthur.
Here. Now, let's see. All right. That's a very lovely picture.
1939 started on an optimistic note when in April, Stalin, perhaps the greatest mass murderer in history, signed an anti-Nazi pact with Great Britain and France. In May, while Britain's royal family toured the whole of Canada, our family decided to have a rerun of Kath and Jack's wedding. They'd been married the year before, and here we are. Wow, do we look fancy. Hey, let's take a closer look at those hats, shall we? Is that where Kate got her ideas from? In June, Frank Sinatra made his first recording. Here he is warbling it with the Harry James Orchestra.
From the bottom of my heart, I love you. What more can I say? From the bottom of my heart, I need you. You're part of
Yeah, I agree. It's not one of his best, but you gotta start somewhere, right? It's a warm Sunday in July. I guess that's why I'm all dressed up. And the family frolics in the garden. My father and I are discussing, obviously, the finer points of golf, and Molly keeps sewing. Come hell or high water, let empires crumble, let wars devastate the land. Molly is gonna get finished, whatever it is she's working on. In August, my parents took me on vacation to a little seaside town called Watchet. And then it all came crashing down. On September the 1st, under a prefabricated excuse to shift the blame, Hitler's army, supported by his powerful panzer regiments and the Luftwaffe, attacked Poland. It was all over in a very short time. But before it all ended, Mr. Chamberlain gave us all the glad news.
At once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
Mr. Charles Spedding of Hoxton, remember?
I'd always remember that day that war was declared.
Well, I have to say that I don't remember it. Perhaps the family gathered around the radio and listened to the great news, but I wasn't there. Nobody ever tells me anything. Austerity rears its ugly head, and here's Molly giving Grandma a shampoo and set. I think Grandad may be on sentry duty at Walden Manor. No matter how fierce the war, nothing can stop the English from their afternoon tea. There's my dad in the first picture between Molly and Grandma. I asked Molly recently about this photo of her, thinking perhaps it was a church ceremony since it was a Sunday. She said, no, we were at this farm where they kept silkworms, the ones that made the dress for the coronation. This photo was taken on the 8th of June 1940. That's 3 days after the end of Operation Dynamo, the so-called miracle of Dunkirk. Granddad retired, and he and his lady moved down to watch it. My mother also stayed and watched it with me. She decided the sea air was more bracing than being blitzed. So here we are, well and truly on the rocks. Kath had moved up to Sheffield to be near Jack, who was already in the army. Walden Manor was only 5 miles from the RAF fighter base at Biggin Hill, and Molly, now by herself, decided things were getting a little uncomfortable. So she joined the exodus to the seaside, and there we all were, in Watch It, which happened to have a movie theater all of its own. Well, I guess you call it a cinema. Here it is, just to the extreme left on this photo of the Esplanade. 2 shows a week, 2 movies probably with each show. Here I was, in movie buff heaven. Naturally, I hardly ever missed a show. And here are some of my favorites from 1940. It goes without saying that most of the bad guys in most of the movies were Germans. Boo hiss. Sorry folks, I know the war's over, but that's the way it was then. And here we are at the end of the photos in the album that Molly gave me, and the end of this small piece of history.
Grab your coat, don't forget your hat, but leave your worries, leave 'em on the doorstep. Life's sweet, just direct your feet to the sunny side of the street. Hop on that pitter-pat, you know that happy tune is my step. Life's a reef, if you dig that beat on the sunny